students, this video is on Gulliver's Travels. So I'm sure that you all have read Gulliver's in Lilliput Lands. This time you would get to know that how Gulliver's reached in a land where he found giants. So, first of all, you must know that this is actually a book written by Jonathan Swift. So, let's start this chapter. When a person tells a story of his own life in his own words, it is called autobiography. Gulliver, a sailor, was once caught in the land of giants. This is how he describes his experience. So, now narrator would be Gulliver. We have some new words here. Billowing, that means very loud noise. Inhabitants means occupants, that means people who live at a certain area. Barren, barren means land with no vegetation. Astonishment means greatly surprised. Crumbled, that means broken into pieces. Grab, it means to pick something suddenly. So let's start the chapter now. On the 16th of June 1730, we discovered land. Our captain sent a dozen men with vessels for water. Vessels means container, if any could be found. When we came to land, we saw no river or spring nor any inhabitants. I went on to explore. Explore means to find something. The country was barren and rocky. I turned back to the joint crew only to see them getting into the boat and rowing for life to get to the ship. Before I could reach them, I observed a huge creature. Observe means to see, huge means very big, creature means living being. Walking after them in the sea as fast as he could. The water of the ocean reached only till his knees. However, the monster was unable to overtake the speeding boat. I turned back quickly and climbed up a steep hill with fields of barley on the either side and the corn rising up to 40 feet. There was a fence to pass from one field to other. So on 16 June 1730, Gulliver, who was in a ship, they found land, and the captain of that ship sent them on that island to bring the water. But Gulliver couldn't find any river or water or no inhabitants, that means no people there, because the land was barren and rocky. In fact, he noticed that all those people, uh, accompanying, they were rowing back to the ship. That means they were doing the action of rowing to go back to the ship. So Gulliver found that a huge creature, it was walking after them, but he could not go ahead them as the boats were all in great speed. And then I is Gulliver here. Gulliver turned back and he climbed up a steep hill. Okay, that was actually a field of barley and corns, and those corns were around 40 feet high. It was impossible for me to climb because every step was 6 feet high. I was trying to find a gap in the hedge when I discovered one of the inhabitants in the next field walking towards the fence. He was of the same size as a creature chasing the boat. I was struck with utmost fear and astonishment and ready to hide myself. He called in a voice much louder than a trumpet. It sounded like thunder. So now Gulliver's all friends, they have already gone and he was alone left there, and he found himself in the field where he was actually climbing on that hedge, that means on that fence which was made of some of the bushes. Hedge means bushes, fence means boundary. So then he saw this man who was equally taller, like the man who was running after the boat. And Gulliver was really, really surprised to see that man, and he tried to hide himself. But then that person called, and his sound, his voice was just like a trumpet, like an musical instrument. 7 monsters like him came towards the field, ready to reap the corn. They carried a reaping hook, which was very big. When one of the reapers approached where I lay hidden, I screamed. And then 7 giant men, they also came there to reap the corn. And one of them, he saw Gulliver, and Gulliver screamed. He shouted as loud as I could. The creature stopped reaping, picked me up between his thumb and forefinger, and brought me close to his eyes, 60 feet above the ground. He looked at me with curiosity and blew my hair aside to get a better view of my face. Now, that man, he picked Gulliver up between his thumb and his forefinger, and he blew the hair which were coming on Gulliver's face to see his face clearly out of curiosity. Curiosity means that he was eager to explore, to find what he was. He called his friends and gently placed me on the ground. So now that giant, he called his friend and he placed Gulliver on the ground. They all sat on the ground to take a closer look at me. I walked slowly backward and forward, pulled off my hat, and made a low bow towards the farmers. I tried to speak to them loudly in several languages. Now, when they all just sat around Gulliver to look at him, and Gulliver bowed before them, and he tried to talk with them with several languages, just to think that they would answer in one of the languages. Each time I did so, the farmer who picked me up held his ear very close to me, but in vain. The farmer took me to his house and placed me at some distance on the dining table, which was 30 feet high from the floor. So, the man who actually picked him, he brought him close to his ear to understand what he was saying, but he couldn't understand. And finally, that giant took him to his home, and there he placed Gulliver on the dining table, which was 30 feet high from the floor. Dinner was brought for the farmer in a dish which was 10 feet in diameter. And when the dinner was brought for that farmer, his plate, the dish, the size of that dish, it was 10 feet in diameter. The farmer's wife crumbled some bread and placed it before me. In the middle of the dinner, I heard a noise behind me. It was the purring of a cat that was 10 times larger than an ox. The farmer's wife was stroking him. Then entered farmer's 1 year old son in the arm of a lady. So, as it was dinner time, farmer's wife crumbled some bread and gave that bread to Gulliver to eat. And then Gulliver noticed the purring, the sound of a cat, which was 10 times bigger than an ox. And it was farmer's wife who was actually stroking him, stroking the cat. Stroke means to touch someone gently. And exactly that time, a lady came there with farmer's son who was 1 year old. On seeing me, the child grabbed me from the table and put my head into his mouth. I shouted so loudly that the baby dropped me. I would have broken my neck if the mother had not held her apron under me. So, when the child saw Gulliver, it grabbed Gulliver and put his head into his mouth. And Gulliver shouted so loudly that the baby dropped Gulliver. And Gulliver could have got hurt, or he could have hurt his neck. But farmer's wife, that mother, she held him with the help of her apron. Later, she put me on her own bed and covered me with a clean white handkerchief. And after that, she put Gulliver on his bed, actually, which was mother's bed, and then she covered Gulliver with a clean handkerchief. I slept dreaming of my home, my wife, and my children. And Gulliver, now he was sleeping and he was thinking of his home, his wife, and his children. So, this was the story of Gulliver's travels in Giant's Land. I hope you enjoyed the story. Thank you very much.